I was halfway through my monologue when I noticed a shadow in the front row of the theater. Not the usual empty seats I was used to during these late-night rehearsals, but someone sitting there, watching me. And honestly, it threw me off so hard I almost forgot my lines. So yeah, here's the setup. I'm rehearsing alone in this tiny community theater downtown, practicing for a role I've been dreaming about for months. The place is usually dead silent at this hour, just me, the stage lights, and the echo of my own voice bouncing off the walls. I like that quiet. It helps me focus, get into character without distractions. But tonight, that quiet got interrupted in the most unexpected way. I'm about to launch into my favorite scene, the one where my character basically breaks down and admits everything he's been holding inside. It's raw, intense stuff, and as I'm pacing the stage, memorizing each word and gesture, I catch movement out of the corner of my eye. Someone settled into the front row, like they've been there the whole time, but I just hadn't noticed. I froze for a second, heart pounding, because it's not like this theater to have an audience at midnight. No one ever comes by unless it's a scheduled rehearsal or a show night, and this wasn't either. I'm scanning the seats, trying to figure out if it's some random person or maybe a janitor taking a break. But then the guy looks up at me and smiles. Not in a creepy way, but like he's actually interested. Like he's waiting to see something real. I swallowed hard and said, can I help you? He shrugged with this easy confidence and said, I hope you don't mind. I was just walking by and heard you rehearsing. Figured I'd stick around. His voice was calm, but had this subtle warmth that made me feel less awkward. He looked kind of familiar, but not in a way I could place right away. He was maybe in his late 20s, dressed casually, but there was something about the way he sat there, completely relaxed, yet clearly attentive, that pulled me in. Now, I'm the kind of guy who's usually totally thrown off by unexpected company. I mean, I tend to keep people at arm's length, especially when I'm in my headspace, preparing for something as personal as this role. But there was something about this stranger's quiet presence that made me want to keep going. Like, maybe I wasn't just talking to empty seats anymore. So I cleared my throat and started again, this time louder, putting every ounce of feeling into the words. And as I looked out and met his eyes, I realized this rehearsal was turning into something way more real than I ever expected. That's when I started wondering, who the hell was this guy? And why was he here, sitting in the front row, just watching me like I was the only thing that mattered? I nailed the scene, or at least I thought I did, but honestly, I was more focused on the guy in the front row than the lines I was saying. There was something about the way he was watching me, not just looking, but really watching, like he was trying to see past the words and into whatever I was feeling underneath. It was unnerving and kind of thrilling all at once. When I finally stopped and took a breath, he clapped softly, just a few slow, deliberate claps. Not the over-the-top applause you'd expect, but the kind that felt genuine. I blinked, caught off guard. "Thanks," I muttered, a little unsure what else to say. He smiled again, this time a little wider. Seriously, that was incredible. His voice had this quiet sincerity that made me want to believe him. "You've got something special." I wanted to play it cool, maybe brush it off with a joke, but the truth was I craved that kind of encouragement more than I cared to admit. "I'm just practicing," I said, but my voice cracked a little, betraying the nerves I'd been trying to hide. He nodded toward the stage, eyes gleaming. "Well, lucky me, I get to see it first." "First?" I echoed, raising an eyebrow. "You're not from around here, are you?" He shook his head. "Nope. I'm new in town. Just moved here last week." He flicked his hand toward the exit, like that explained everything. Needed somewhere to wander after a long day. Ended up here because of the lights. That made me laugh, a little breathless. The lights? Yeah. There's something about the way the stage lights glow through the windows. It's like a beacon. He shrugged again, looking surprisingly at ease. I guess I'm a please mirror for that kind of thing. I wanted to ask more, but part of me was holding back. I don't know why. Maybe because I wasn't used to strangers showing this kind of interest. Or maybe because I was scared of how quickly my heart had started racing when he smiled at me. "Do you want to see another scene?" I found myself asking before I could second guess it. Absolutely, he said without hesitation. So I launched into the next part, a lighter scene this time, something a little less intense, but still meaningful. And as I acted, I watched him lean forward in his seat, completely absorbed. I don't think I'd ever had an audience like this before, not one so unexpectedly present, so quietly supportive. When I finished, he stood up and clapped again. No kidding, you should be performing for bigger crowds. I felt a flush creep up my neck. Thanks. I hope so. We ended up talking for a while after that, me sitting on the edge of the stage and him in the front row. He told me his name was Max, and he worked in graphic design. We swapped stories about moving to the city, favorite bars, and that weird moment when you realize you don't know anyone but also kind of like it that way. There was a comfortable vibe I didn't expect, like we'd known each other longer than a few minutes. I caught myself glancing at him, noticing the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, how his hair tumbled messily over his forehead. It felt easy, natural, like maybe this random encounter was exactly what I needed. At one point, Max reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small notebook. I like to sketch sometimes, he said, flipping it open. I haven't drawn anything in a while, but the theater's got some great shapes and shadows. I leaned over to look, surprised by the loose, confident lines he'd sketched of the stage and seats. Hey, you've got talent too, he grinned. Thanks. Maybe next time you'll let me sketch you practicing. I laughed, feeling my chest tighten with something I hadn't expected to feel when I walked into that theater alone just an hour ago. But then he leaned back, looking thoughtful. You know, it's weird, I almost didn't come in tonight. I just wanted to sit outside and clear my head. Why? I asked, curious despite myself. He shrugged again, this time with a flicker of vulnerability. Moving's hard, leaving everything behind. And I guess I was hoping the lights might lead me to something, or someone. His words stuck with me longer than I'd expected. Here was this stranger, this random guy who just wandered in, and suddenly I was thinking about how often I felt lost in my own life. About how rare it was to find a moment that felt this real, this honest. We talked until the theater started to feel colder, the night growing deep around us. When he finally got up to leave, he hesitated by the door, looking back at me with that same easy smile. Same time tomorrow? He said. I blinked, surprised by how much I wanted to say yes. Yeah, I said, feeling my voice steady with something I hadn't felt in a while. I'd like that. As he walked away into the night, I realized that rehearsal wasn't just about the play anymore. Maybe, just maybe, it was the start of something I never saw coming. The next evening, I found myself back at the theater, nerves buzzing in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. Not because of the rehearsal, but because Max was going to show up again. I kept wondering what the hell I was getting myself into. Was it just some fluke that he happened to wander in last night? Or was he actually interested in this little routine we'd accidentally started? I arrived early, the theater smelling just as familiar. Dusty velvet seats, faint traces of popcorn from long-gone show nights, and that peculiar mix of must and polish you only get in places like this. I sat alone in one of the back rows, running through my lines quietly, but my eyes kept drifting toward the front row. A few minutes before midnight, the door creaked open, and there he was. Max, exactly on time, with that relaxed grin and a small backpack slung over one shoulder. He gave me a quick wave and plopped down in the same seat as before, like this had become his new favorite spot. I brought coffee, he said, pulling a to-go cup from his bag and handing it to me. Figured you might need some fuel. It was a small gesture, but somehow it made the whole place feel less lonely. I took a sip and smiled. Thanks, man. This is perfect. We fell into a rhythm pretty fast. I rehearsed while he watched, occasionally jotting down something in his notebook or making quick sketches. I caught myself stealing glances at him, noticing how his lips would twitch when he found something funny, or how he'd lean forward when I hit a particularly emotional beat. After a while, I stopped mid-scene and asked, "So, what made you stick around last night? Was it really just the lights?" He laughed softly, eyes twinkling. Partly, but honestly, I think I was just craving some connection. Moving to a new city is one thing, but feeling invisible on top of it? That's another. I nodded, feeling a pang of understanding. I'd been there, more times than I cared to admit. Yeah, it's rough. I've lived here a while, but sometimes it still feels like I'm performing for empty seats. That's exactly what I was thinking, he said, gesturing at the stage. Except tonight, you've got a real audience. That cracked me up, and for the first time since meeting him, I felt completely at ease. It was like we'd stumbled into this weird, unspoken agreement to be each other's audiences, just two guys in a mostly empty theater finding some kind of normal. As the night wore on, I found myself opening up more than I usually would. I told him about why I'd gotten into acting, the way it let me be someone else for a while, and sometimes helped me figure out who I really was underneath all the noise. Max listened, really listened, like my words meant something. And when it was his turn, he shared bits about his life too, about the design firm he'd left behind, the family he missed, and this persistent feeling that he was chasing something he couldn't quite name. It was strange how quickly all the walls I'd built up started to crumble. The way he looked at me, like he wanted to see past the act and into the real me, made me want to take that risk. At one point, he reached out and rested his hand on mine. The contact was electric, like a secret spark that neither of us wanted to shout about but couldn't ignore. "Hey," he whispered, voice low and warm. "You okay with this?" I swallowed hard and nodded. "Yeah, I've wanted this for a while, I think." His smile was soft, full of something that felt like hope. "Me too." We sat like that for a moment, hands still touching, the theater around us fading into the background. The quiet hum of the city outside felt miles away. Then the silence broke when I said, "So, what happens now?" Max tilted his head, considering. "Well, I was thinking maybe you could show me some of your other favorite spots around the city. Maybe over coffee sometime?" I grinned, heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with the rehearsal. "Sounds like a plan," I said. Before I knew it, the late-night rehearsal had turned into a kind of first date. We left the theater together, stepping out into the cool night air, and I realized that sometimes the best kind of love stories start in the most unexpected places, even when you're rehearsing alone and someone just decides to sit in the front row. We ended up at a small cafe a few blocks from the theater, the kind of place where the baristas know your order before you even step inside. Max seemed like a regular already, greeting the guy behind the counter like they'd been friends for years. Meanwhile, I just sat there feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness, like I was about to step onto a stage with no script. We grabbed our coffees to go and found a bench outside, the night still warm but brushed with a hint of fall in the air. I watched Max take a sip and then exhale like he'd finally caught his breath after holding it in all day. "So," I said, trying to sound casual but definitely feeling my heart race, "what's the story behind the sketchbook? I didn't realize graphic design meant you were basically an artist too." He smiled, that easy smile that made me forget how awkward I could be. "I guess I never really thought about it like that. Design's about communication, right? But sometimes I miss just drawing for myself, without any rules or deadlines." I nodded. "I get that. Acting's the same for me. When I'm on stage, it's like I'm telling my story without having to explain it with words." He looked at me for a beat, then said, "I think that's why I wanted to come back to watch you again. There's something honest about it, like you're not pretending." "Thanks," I said, feeling a flush creep up my neck. "That means a lot." He chuckled softly and shifted on the bench. "So, what else do you like about this city? If you're going to be my unofficial tour guide, I want to pick the good spots." I grinned, suddenly energized. "You're in luck. I know a few hidden gems. This tiny bookstore that plays old jazz records, a rooftop with the best view of the skyline, and a little diner that's open 24/7 where the pancakes are worth the wait." Max raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like a plan. When do we start the tour?" I felt my nerves settle into something warmer, more hopeful. "How about tomorrow? Same time." He nodded, eyes bright. "It's a date." The word hung between us, soft but heavy with promise. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The next day, I showed up at the bookstore just as it was opening. Max was already there, waiting outside with that same relaxed grin. We spent hours wandering through dusty shelves, sharing favorite authors, and debating the merits of classic versus modern fiction. He sketched while I talked, his pencil moving almost without thinking. That afternoon, we ended up on the rooftop I'd mentioned. The city sprawled beneath us like a living map of lights and possibilities. We sat side by side, drinking cheap beer from the corner store and watching the sun dip below the horizon. "I like this," Max said quietly. "It's peaceful." "Yeah," I agreed. "It's my little escape when everything gets too loud." He turned to me, eyes serious. "I'm really glad I met you." My heart thudded in my chest, and I found myself leaning in just a little closer. "Me too." There was a moment, just a flicker, where the world felt like it had paused. Then he reached out, fingers brushing against mine, and it was like this slow electric current ran through me. Over the next few weeks, things got more real. We kept meeting up, exploring the city's quiet corners and loud streets, learning each other's rhythms and stories. Max was patient and kind, always encouraging me to be myself, whether on stage or off. One night, after a particularly intense rehearsal, I found him waiting for me outside the theater. He had that sketchbook in hand, but there was something different in the way he looked at me, more open, more vulnerable. "I drew you again," he said softly, flipping it open to a new page. The sketch captured me mid-performance, the raw emotion frozen in pencil strokes. "You make it easy." I swallowed hard, touched in a way I couldn't quite explain. "You make it easy too." He smiled, and I took a step closer. "There's something I've been wanting to ask you." "Yeah?" He hesitated, then reached out to tuck a stray strand of hair behind my ear. "Would you want to try this, us, outside the theater? See where it goes?" I nodded before I could overthink it. "I'd like that." That night, standing under the dim glow of the street lamp, it felt like everything I'd been rehearsing for, on stage and in life, was finally coming together. And maybe, just maybe, this unexpected audience in the front row was the start of the best story I'd ever get to tell. After that night, things started to feel different between us, not in a dramatic, movie scene kind of way, but in the small, quiet moments that made all the difference. Like how Max would text me just to say good morning, or how I found myself picking up the phone to tell him about the little victories or mess-ups in rehearsal. It was new and honestly a little scary, but it was also kind of amazing. One evening, a few weeks later, Max invited me over to his apartment. It was the first time I was going to his place, and I didn't really know what to expect. The moment I walked in, I was hit with this cozy vibe. Walls covered with framed prints and drawings, plants in every corner, and this faint smell of coffee and something I couldn't quite put my finger on. It felt lived in, but also kind of like a safe haven. He poured us both a glass of wine and sat down on the couch, patting the seat next to him. "So, what's the verdict? Are you a fan of my decorating skills?" I laughed. "Honestly, I'm impressed. It's got character." He grinned, eyes sparkling. "Thought you'd say that." We talked for hours that night about our pasts, our dreams, the awkwardness of dating when you're still figuring out who you are. Somewhere between the second glass of wine and an impromptu playlist of 80s hits, I realized how much I wanted to stay exactly where I was, right there, with him. At one point, Max reached over and took my hand, fingers curling around mine. It wasn't rushed or desperate. It was just natural, like the two of us had been waiting for this moment without even knowing it. "I'm really glad you came back," he said softly. "Me too," I answered, feeling my cheeks warm. "You've made this whole city feel less lonely." He smiled, leaning in just a little. I could feel the heat from his breath, the steady beat of his heart against mine. "You know, I was thinking," he said, voice low, "we should try acting together sometime, a scene or even something silly. What do you think?" I hesitated, then grinned. "You mean like an actual play, with lines and everything?" He nodded. "Why not? Could be fun. And who better to practice with than you?" The idea was both terrifying and thrilling. I'd always been the solo performer, used to working alone, but the thought of sharing the stage with Max made my stomach do flips. "Okay," I said, taking a deep breath. "Let's do it." In the weeks that followed, our rehearsals became a new kind of routine. We met at the theater, or sometimes in his living room, scripts in hand, stumbling over lines and laughing at our mistakes. It was messy but real, and every time we shared a scene, I felt closer to him. There was this one afternoon where we were working on a scene about two people confessing their feelings. Awkward, vulnerable, and full of tension. Halfway through, Max looked at me with this serious expression and said, "You don't have to act for me to know how you feel." I blinked, startled. "What do you mean?" He shrugged, a little sheepish. "I guess I just mean, I see you. Not the character, not the actor. You." It hit me harder than I expected, and I found myself searching for words. I feel the same. That night, after our rehearsal, we stayed at the theater for a while, sitting side by side in the quiet darkness. Max's hand found mine again, and I didn't pull away. "I'm scared," I admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "Scared of getting too close, of messing this up." He squeezed my hand gently. "Me too, but maybe that's what makes it worth it." I smiled, feeling a mixture of hope and vulnerability I wasn't sure I deserved. Over the next few months, our relationship unfolded like a slow burn. Not everything was perfect. We had disagreements, moments where insecurity crept in, and times when life outside the theater demanded attention. But through it all, we kept showing up for each other. One chilly evening, just as the first snow started to fall, Max surprised me with tickets to a play downtown. It was a small production, nothing fancy, but it reminded me of how far we'd come, from a chance encounter in an empty theater to this. As we sat there in the dim light, watching actors tell a story, I squeezed Max's hand and thought about how strange and wonderful life could be. Sometimes the best things show up when you least expect them, like a stranger sitting quietly in the front row, waiting to become something so much more. That night at the theater, sitting beside Max in the dim glow of the stage lights, I felt like I was. The actors on stage poured their heart out, and I couldn't help but glance at Max every now and then, catching the way his eyes softened during the quieter moments, the subtle way he reached for my hand when the scene got intense. After the curtain fell and the applause died down, we stayed seated, reluctant to leave the warmth, and shared silence. Outside, the snow had turned the city into a quiet, white world, softening the edges and muffling the usual noise. Max tugged his coat tighter, glancing at me with that familiar, easy smile. "You want to walk back?" he asked, and I nodded. The streets were nearly empty, save for the occasional car sliding carefully over slick patches and the distant hum of streetlights. We walked side by side, shoulders brushing occasionally. I could feel this quiet electricity in the air between us, like the night itself was holding its breath. So, Max started, breaking the silence. "What's next for you? The role you're rehearsing for. Do you think it's going to open doors?" I shrugged, the breeze tossing my hair. "Honestly, I don't know. It's a great part, but the industry's unpredictable. Sometimes it feels like the harder you work, the more doors close in your face." He nodded thoughtfully. "That's rough. But hey, you've got a real talent. I've seen it firsthand." For a moment, I just let his words settle inside me. It was rare to get that kind of genuine support, not just for the craft, but for me as a person. "Thanks, Max. That means a lot coming from you." We turned a corner onto a quieter street, the snow crunching underfoot. Then, out of nowhere, Max stopped and turned to me, eyes serious. "Can I be honest about something?" he asked. I raised an eyebrow, curious and a little nervous. He took a breath, fingers nervously fiddling with the cuff of his sleeve. "I'm scared." I blinked, surprised. "Scared? About what?" "About us," he admitted softly. "About how fast things are moving. About getting hurt. I've been through my fair share of messy endings, and honestly, I'm terrified of that happening again." I reached out, squeezing his hand. "Hey, I get that. I'm scared too. But if we don't try, we'll never know." He smiled, relief flickering across his face. "Yeah, you're right." We walked the rest of the way in a comfortable silence, the snowflakes swirling around us like tiny cold promises. Over the next few weeks, we tried to find balance between our rehearsals, our day jobs, and the little life we were building together. It wasn't always easy. There were late nights when exhaustion hit both of us hard, and days when the weight of everything outside the theater pressed in. One evening, after a particularly grueling rehearsal, I found Max waiting outside the theater again. This time, he had that sketchbook under his arm, but there was something different in his eyes, something quieter, more vulnerable. "I drew something," he said, flipping it open. The sketch was of the theater itself, the empty seats, the stage lights casting long shadows, and a figure standing center stage. I recognized the pose immediately. It was me, caught mid-monologue, raw and exposed. "It's beautiful," I whispered, touched more than I expected. He looked at me, searching. I wanted to capture this moment. Us, you, me, everything. I swallowed, heart pounding. "Max, this means more than you know." He took my face gently in his hands, his thumb brushing over my cheek. "I think I'm falling for you." My breath caught, and I couldn't help but smile. "I've been falling for you since the first night you sat in the front row." We leaned in slowly, the world around us fading until it was just the two of us. Two imperfect, hopeful people finding something real in the middle of chaos. Our kiss was soft at first, hesitant like a first draft, then deeper, more certain. It felt like coming home. From that night on, everything shifted. We were no longer just two people sharing rehearsals and stolen moments. We were something more. A team, a pair, a quiet fire burning against the cold. Of course, life continued to throw challenges our way. There were auditions that didn't go well, days when Max's work stressed him out, and moments when doubt crept in. But we faced it all together, learning to trust not just in ourselves, but in each other. One day, a few months later, I got a call from the director of the play I'd been rehearsing for. They wanted to offer me the part. It was the break I'd been waiting for. I called Max right away, my hands shaking with excitement. When he picked up, I could hear the smile in his voice before he even said a word. "That's amazing," he said. "I'm so proud of you." I laughed, overwhelmed. "I couldn't have done it without you." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "We're just getting started, you know." I smiled, feeling like the luckiest guy alive. "Yeah, we are." Looking back, it's crazy to think how one random night, me rehearsing alone, Max sitting quietly in the front row, turned into this whole beautiful, messy, unexpected adventure. And honestly, I wouldn't change a thing. The night of the opening finally arrived, and I stood backstage with my heart pounding, not from nerves about the performance, but because Max was somewhere in the audience, waiting for me. I could feel his presence like a quiet anchor, steadying me amid the chaos of last-minute preparations and buzzing excitement. As the curtain rose and I stepped into the light, all the rehearsals, doubts, and fears melted away. It was just me, the character, and the story we were telling. And somehow, knowing Max was out there made every word feel more alive. When the final scene ended and the applause swelled around me, I caught sight of Max in the front row, his smile wide and eyes shining. After the curtain call, we met at the stage door, and without a word, he pulled me into a hug that said everything. Walking home together that night, the city quiet and cool around us, I thought about how unexpected this all was, the way one chance encounter had grown into something real and lasting. Max slipped his hand into mine, fingers curling naturally, and I felt a warmth that had little to do with the chilly air. "Do you ever think about how weird it is?" he asked softly. "How one night can change everything." I smiled, squeezing his hand. "Yeah, but I'm glad it did." He laughed. "Me too. We didn't need grand gestures or dramatic confessions. Just this. Two people holding on to each other, figuring life out together. There would be challenges ahead, sure, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face them. Because sometimes, the most meaningful stories aren't the ones written on stage. They're the ones we create in the quiet moments, with someone who truly sees us. And as we walked beneath the streetlights, hand in hand, I knew this was just the beginning.